Is it possible to change things? Can I rise above the flood? Will the process cleanse my soul? Or is it always in the blood?
Okay. I want to welcome everybody back to the In the Blood podcast. As it was suggested to me last time Jason and I sat down, calling out the date's a bad idea because I'm just going to get it wrong anyways. And plus, we don't know when people are listening. So I'm going to go with like the newfangled approach of saying today is whatever day it is where you are, and it's whatever time you're listening. And that's just going to have to
Welcome
be
to your
good
day.
enough. So with me, as always, is the pepperoni to my pizza, Jason the Dice Man Moore,
I'm the meat.
and special situations that I don't want to say it's like special guest because Sarah is joining us as like a third wheel, an additional host on today's show for a conversation. So we've got from Spirit Journey Collective, friend of the channel, Sarah Tye. Sarah, welcome.
Third wheel. Way to make her feel comfortable.
That's okay. I'll take it. I'm just happy to be here. And yeah, so I know I've been on your podcast a couple times and I'm really excited to be back.
Yeah, so normally like
Yeah.
Sarah does like tarot card readings and like she's like this, well, I don't want to build you up too hard and like give you like a swelled head thing like, she's my personal guru. But but today we're gonna let her step away from all that. Like she doesn't have to like see where the spirits are leading us or like pull any cards and see like how effed up we really are. We can just talk to her like she's people.
Yeah, and I'm
Oh,
looking forward to just kind of sharing because when I've heard your podcast in the past, there's so many times where I want to say something in response. And so now I get to. I'm excited.
Oh God, now
fair
she's gonna
enough.
shut us both down.
Yep. Welcome to the Sarah Show.
Well, it should be actually like interesting because like should it come to that where one of us says something that really, really gets under your skin, it would tie in perfectly with today's topic. Because what we want to talk about is whether rage can actually be a positive thing. Now, I think Jason and I, as guys, we kind of like start off at an advantage because rage, anger, I mean, any of these strong emotions, they're seen as typically positive things. I mean, of course, there's exceptions to that. Whereas when a woman expresses like anything strong, she's almost instantly dismissed as a bitch.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's definitely a problem in today's society.
yeah,
So,
100%. And when you mentioned that being a topic, I thought, well, I have a lot to say about that.
okay, well, the pressure's on. What do you got to say?
Oh, sure. You're just going to make me start.
I'll put it on either you or Jason. You can fight it out amongst yourselves. Let's see where the rage comes up.
So, what do you think, Sarah?
Well, just to start off with, I would definitely say that as a woman, we're not really allowed to feel or express rage. I mean, and I will say that's cultural because I do think other cultures, women have a little more, are allowed to be more feisty, but especially in like the culture that I was raised in, I wasn't allowed to be, I wasn't really allowed to express anger or rage. And when I did, I was over emotional, I was out of control. And so I've learned to have like my relationship with rage is an interesting one. It's one that I'm still healing because when I feel it, it's my like natural instinct to stuff it immediately.
Like when you say like it's your instinct to stuff it, is that because of conditioning growing up?
100%. Yep.
It's like I grew up like in well, I mean I've got more siblings than what I grew up in the house with, but in our household it was me and two sisters primarily. And I did observe like starting it from a fairly young age that there was a really big double standard between what was not just tolerated me versus my sisters, but what was also encouraged. Because my dad used to really, really push this idea that like when a guy gets pissed off, that's when he's operating at his best. I mean, my dad was like he liked violence. He had a background as a bare knuckles boxer. I mean, his solution to just about everything was just go kick his ass. And getting loud, as long as you were articulate, I mean, that was good. Getting big, getting strong, that was awesome. But the second either of my sisters was going to try the same approach, it was like what you were describing, getting dismissed almost as like hysterical.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know, Jason, like what was your kind of like cultural climate with rage growing up?
Oh, I was a calm little pussycat. I made sure that everybody
I was going to say that doesn't sound quite right.
yeah. Well, with my past, I had a bit of a different quote unquote. I'm doing air quotes for those that are listening to the podcast. Different upbringing. I was brought up by the streets for the most part, so rage was just part of my tool bag. It was probably the biggest part of my tool bag. Using it to solve problems, using it to show indifference, using it to show that I was right. For many, many years, it applied to everything. And in that lifestyle situation, it kept me alive. It kept my voice heard. It stopped me from just being a statistic on the streets. It made me to be somebody. Um, Learning to get out of it was the hard part. How to have a relationship without the rage. Oh, that was the hard part.
Yeah, I'd love to speak to that because one thing I've learned, and granted, I still have a long way to go with my own relationship with rage, but one thing I've learned about rage and anger is it's not a bad thing. Like as a whole, when you're whether male or female, like it's not a bad thing. It's actually there to help you understand when there's an injustice, when you need to fight for yourself. And it's actually a very positive emotion, but it's been spun in such a negative way. And so, I mean, I know for men, at least when it's like the testosterone buildup of rage and like Braveheart and stuff like that kind is like, everyone's like, yay, that's the kind of anger we want. But when it comes to like just out of control rage, it has a bad rep, right? And even for women, of course, expressing rage, we get put under the bus. But as a whole, I've learned that rage is actually it's not a bad emotion. It's just learning how to trust it and not let it consume you.
Right. Absolutely. And in street culture, again, it's totally different because women having rage is looked at as a good thing on the streets. It's because my partner Sue was a rageaholic as well. And whenever a duo like somebody and his girlfriend were being the thing and getting in on me and making whatever, or on her, we always had each other's back. So I never had to worry. So on the streets, one of my best friends, female, was also a rager. And it was accepted in the culture, in the street culture.
That's so interesting, like the cultural contrast when we're dealing with what on the surface you would just assume like okay, North American culture, if you want to like boil it down to that, I would have assumed is just like one homogenous mass. But I mean, it sounds like even within that, we've got this fragmented series of subcultures that we don't always know to consider when we're pondering things like this. Like that angle right there, Jason, like that wouldn't have even crossed my mind if it was just like Sarah and I sitting here talking, say.
Right.
So that actually did cross my mind just because my boyfriend's black, and that's been a whole thing for me to learn a whole other side of the culture. And when he's like he'll tease me and get under my skin, and I have such a hard time fighting back, even when it's just playful. I still feel like I don't know how to respond, and he's like, well, just play back with me, just respond playfully back, tease me back, be an asshole back, like it's okay. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And I was telling him about like, well, women we're taught to like not have anger and not like not even just anger, but like to be this perfectly primed person. And he's like, well, not in the black culture. Women are feisty in that culture. Like and so that also made me think of it like, oh yeah, that's true. I've seen that before. So it depends on the culture. But I think that as a whole though, like even it doesn't matter which culture you're in, I think still women have that stigma of being hysterical. You know what I mean? I think there's just different levels of what's acceptable and whatever culture it is.
Right. And then it is definitely culture based because, like in the East Indian culture, women are not heard at all. Never mind rage or anything else. Your opinion doesn't matter in a lot of it. And I'm talking old school. I don't know current like right now, but in old school, it was they're not you don't get educated. You stay at home, right? You wear your garments to cover yourself, even if you have a little bit of your forechest showing, then you're a slut and you're stoned. Back in the day, in African culture, from what I've seen, women are going out and getting also getting berries, food, water, taking a more predominant role, being the dad's not here, somebody gets on their child, and they're on that person. So it's totally different, totally opposite what like the Indian culture used to be. So again, like you were saying, it is definitely a cultural significant difference.
Even like hearing these different perspectives and like considering the different cultural context, I still like I'm finding myself a little torn here, like in the present, because I mean, growing up, like, I mean, like going back to where we started off at the top, I mean, the environment I was raised in, it was like kind of like almost expected that I was going to be kind of ragey. And the older I get, the more I try to really, really move away from that. But even as I move away from it, I still feel really, really torn because I understand that there are strong positives to the emotional end of rage. There's strong positive to like the way you can protect or defend when you're inspired by it. On the other hand, I feel like this necessity and this value is bumping up against the social stigma. And I don't know, maybe it's just like an insecurity in me. Like I really do care how I'm perceived. It's easy for me to say, no, I don't care. But at the end of the day, I kind of do. I don't want to look like I'm irrational or angry, even when maybe like appearing that way may be the best play.
Right.
I think it also comes down to like, so that's hard because like for me, like I said, I have a long way to go. Like logically, I understand rage can be a very positive thing. Actually, like living day to day with it, I still try and stuff it. So it is that kind of awareness for myself of like what you're saying, that feeling of being torn. Um, but I do think it depends on like what you do with it. I think when you're able to be self-aware enough to be like, oh my God, I'm feeling really angry right now, just acknowledging that can help you discern what to do next with it versus just reacting. And I think that a lot of us who aren't self-aware, or even those of us that are and are triggered, sometimes we get caught up in that emotion and then we react. And what is it? I just read it recently. Feelings is basically what feelings in motion. I think I said that wrong, but anyways, yeah. There's a quote there, but I don't remember what it is.
Oh, fair enough. I'm looking at it from a totally different angle, not in but it's not in direct relationship, but I used rage and my knowledge of being dangerous, I guess, for lack of a better term. Not that and I just want to clarify, I don't think I'm a tough guy. I've had my ass handed to me more than I've won, but I got to the point where I actually enjoyed fighting. So rage was to me was a friend. And when I became a father, and I mean instinctively, the minute I held my daughter, my rage turned into protection. And I don't care who it was. I don't care what bad thing they said about my kids. As soon as somebody said something negative about my kids, I used my rage to fight and show that you don't mess with my kids, you don't mess with my family. So I used it to better my relationship with my kids, but not directly with my kids, indirectly by showing everybody outwardly that this is where I stand. And win, lose, or draw, if you go against my kids, I'm going to be the one bringing it to you. So a lot of people saw that as negative. And surprisingly enough, a lot of people in the school system saw it as like a really positive thing. I looked at it as indifferent. It's what I got to do to protect my kids. That's how I saw it.
So I've got a question for you, like based on all of that, and I realize maybe this is something that we probably should have touched on right from the beginning. How would you define rage?
Myself or Sarah?
You, well,
Okay.
you to start. I
Um,
guess we should all probably touch on that.
I would define rage as an over aggressive physical anger. Yeah, I think that's where I land.
I would say the same because I feel like anger and rage are actually two separate entities because we're kind of almost talking about interchangeably. I think anger is just the emotion of I'm upset, and rage is like the manifestation of it in like physical form where it's bigger and more aggressive, like you said.
Right.
That's
Like,
actually like an interesting distinction because when I Googleized it, like to see what the dictionary says about rage, and I'm not sure that I completely land with what the dictionary is saying because like what the dictionary is indicating is that it's the anger, but in an uncontrolled state. And
mhm.
I don't feel that like when I'm experiencing rage, there's that total loss of control. I think for me, it would be more like um, anger manifesting in a less inhibited way.
Well,
Yeah.
you've seen me rage, and that's when I stop and I get focused. That's when I go like direct bang on, like boom.
No, and I'm like mentally, I'm there with you. It's like there's this cool calm comes over me, but the outward actions, the physical actions, they look uncontrolled, but there
Mhm.
is like a colder, more focused mind behind. Like, I guess like the outward manifestation is more like theatrics than anything else for me. I don't know how it is for everybody though.
I would compare it to um, so I don't know if people know, but back in our day we had what were called caps, and they were little things you would hit and they'd go bang, like a loud bang. I would compare anger and rage to caps and pipe bombs.
Hmm.
One's an explosive, I don't care what I damage, I'm just going to ruin everything in sight. One is just kind of, I'm going to make a lot of noise and make you realize that my emotions are really intense right now and I'm very mad.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, that sounds about right. I think everyone responds differently, and some people get more into the pipe bomb,
Yep.
and some get more into the, I'm just gonna make sure you hear me and see me. And but I find it interesting, AC, what you said about it being more theatrics because so I grew up. So for me, I think one of the reasons why rage is so complicated for me is because I grew up with an alcoholic father who would rage. I mean, like scary holes in walls, screaming, stuff like that. And so for me, like when I see that sort of thing, I'm out. I'm like, I can't stick around for this because it triggers me so much. But I found out later on, probably about maybe almost a decade ago now, or a little less, but I discovered that um, learning about abusive men, because I unfortunately married one and dated one and all that stuff, and like down the line, is that they're not as out of control as they look.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of it's this really great book called Why Does He Do That? I don't remember who it's by, but basically when people rage and they appear out of control, a lot of the times they're doing stuff on purpose. And
Hmm.
that's what I would think back to like my dad when he would be doing his quote theatrics and he'd break things. It would never be his things. It was always other things, other people's things that
So he
really
couldn't
didn't.
have been that out of control.
Exactly. Like there was definitely this element of he was thinking about it before he did it, even though in the moment it appeared like it was just unpredictable.
I don't know. Was that the, are you talking about the book with, he was a counselor, I think it was?
Yes, I believe
Andy
so. He,
Grandcott?
yes, that one. Yeah, fantastic book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really makes you understand a lot.
Have you
I
read it?
kind of like the way you're describing that there is like this like a guy doesn't necessarily take leave of his senses when he's raging.
Mhm.
Because I'd heard it said years ago that when a man gets angry, his cognitive processes break down, and like, except in the most extreme situations in my life, I can't say that I have personally found that to be true. Naturally, everybody's got their breaking point where I think like that. Well, maybe again, this might just be me coming from my own mental health perspective. So like, it's really easy to say. I think everybody's got a breaking point where maybe they do kind of take leave of their conscious mind a couple times over the course of their life. Generally speaking, like Jason and I were saying before, it's like I didn't, my cognitive processes, if anything, were getting sharper. They weren't dismantling themselves. So
I
the
do want
fact,
to speak to that.
yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Okay, because I do think there are moments where we do respond through like triggers, and I think triggers do tend to like the reactions are almost instantaneous, and that doesn't necessarily mean like the physical like theatrics part, but when you go from 0 to 100, I think that necessarily in those moments it could be kind of like, oh my god, what's happening,
Mhm.
until you kind of catch up with yourself. Like that's been like, for me, and maybe this is also a me thing, so because there's different versions of rage, right, and anger. And for me, and because I probably have such an unhealthy relationship with it, when it hits me, it's more like it takes me a second to realize I went 0 to 100 for me. And I don't know, just this a really short story, but I know that we connected for another recording. I think it was last week, and I think I told you there was a Starbucks debacle that happened,
Hmm.
and because for me, especially I think because of my relationship with rage, it takes me a lot to get to that point where I'm really, really upset. It really takes a lot. I have to be like really triggered and all that. And this particular morning was the perfect storm. I had just come off 2 days of Disneyland, so I was exhausted. My feet hurt. I was tired. I was, excited to come and chat with you and be on the podcast with you. And so that morning, I was going to get Starbucks on my way home. And then I was going to enjoy a nice breakfast, and then I was going to get ready, and it was going to be great. Like, that's how I pictured my morning. And my boyfriend called me and said, hey, can you, because he's works crazy hours. He works like 70 hours a week. And so he asked me, he's like, hey, he's at work, and he's like, hey, can you get me some coffee? And I go to Starbucks, do a Starbucks run. And I was like, well, I'm going to Starbucks anyways, so I might as well grab it, drop it off, and go home. It wasn't going to mess up my plans. But Starbucks messed up my he placed an order, like a mobile order, and I pulled up and I placed my order and said, hey, I'm also picking up this mobile order. They said, great. Pulled up to the thing, and she gave me our drinks, and she gave me a bag, and cool. And I asked her 3 different times, is this everything? Is this everything? Is this everything? And she said, yep, that's everything. Cool. Left. Come to find out, there's a whole other bag missing. And I
Oh,
didn't know this till I got to my boyfriend's work. So I gave him the coffee that said his name, and I pulled out what I assumed was his out of our bag. And he's like, oh no, I got a lot more than this. And that's when we realized that everything in the bag was his. And at this point, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, now I'm not going to have time to enjoy my breakfast. Now I'm not going to have time to like relax before I get on this podcast with you. And I mean, for a split second, I was just like freaking out. I was so upset. My poor boyfriend was like, calm down, you're okay. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I'm driving back to go get the rest of our food, and I realized that they put all of our coffees in his name for some weird reason. So I gave him my coffee, which means I had to go back to switch out our coffee after I got the bag.
Oh,
I was so upset. I mean, I was like, and my boyfriend's like on the phone with me. He's like, calm down, like, it's okay. You're still gonna have time, like drive safe. I'm like, I'm driving safe, but I was so angry. In fact, when I pulled up to talk to them, he's like, don't yell at them, which I didn't. But I was just like, it took a lot to get me there. But once I was there, I had to like reel myself back in, and I teach this too. Like, things happen out of our control. It's happening for us, not to us. And I'm trying to do all the talking myself down. But man, that immediate like 0 to 100, it was real and,
mhm.
valid, but also, I could have handled it 10 times better than I did. The worst thing I said to the person as she was handing me my bag, I said, I asked you 3 times if I had everything, and you said yes. And she legitimately looked scared of me, even though I said it just like that. I didn't yell or anything like that. She's like, I'm so sorry. And then in that moment, I thought, you know what? I don't know what kind of morning this girl's having. You know, could have been really busy in there, could have just gotten lost. And I thought, you know what? I can't hold that against her. And that kind of helped me release it. But up until that point, it was really hard. And so I do think there are moments where we do kind of go 0 to 100. And then it's like, what do we do with it once we get to that point?
Well, something that Jason and I have worked on a lot over the years is, instead of looking at the world around us and framing it in something resembling, okay, like, why is this happening to me? Why are you doing this to me? Why are you making me feel this way? Instead, shifting it into the frame of why am I reacting this way? Why am I feeling this? And like sort of turning it more personal. And I found like when I hit my breaking point, when I really like you said go to zero from 0 to 100 and just like start really, really breaking down, it's usually because somebody has unknowingly triggered a trauma response in me. And like I mean, I don't know for sure with you, Sarah, but I know like with Jason and there's a lot of trauma in our past, and sometimes like we get kind of like confident in the fact that well we've addressed these things, we've either disconnected the hot buttons or at the very least we've done a good job of shielding them so we're not going to get surprised by these big emotions. But every once in a great while surprise, and there it is. And then I love that whole idea of like talking about like what do we do in that moment, Jason?
Um, Actually, I'm going to change gears just for a second because this is burning in the back of my head.
Burn
So I
away.
really apologize. But Sarah, because of your responses, I have a very serious question. I want you to ponder for a couple seconds and give us an answer. You said you continually say I have my relationship is unhealthy with rage. I have an unhealthy relationship with rage. And from what you're describing to me, the way you keep yourself in control and such, it doesn't necessarily sound like you have an unhealthy relationship. Is it possible that you think you have an unhealthy relationship because of conditioning? Because you mentioned, sorry, I'm just going to finish up my thought here. Sorry. You mentioned that, you weren't able to keep it in and you did do the self talk and you brought it out appropriately
Good
in this
catch.
specific instance. Anyways, sorry, go
You
ahead.
know, yeah, no, I mean, yes, I think that that absolutely could be part of it, but I think it's more so me owning it. That's where I say it's unhealthy. And here's a perfect example. After that whole thing, after I was calming down and realizing it probably wasn't as big of a deal as it seemed, and I made it in time, and sure I didn't get to sit and relax and enjoy my breakfast, but it wasn't that big of a deal. Like life happens, you got to adjust or whatever. But for me, my next response was, oh my God, my boyfriend just saw me freak out and I need to apologize to him. Like he should not see me that way. And that was over the top. And I mean, and so I can't tell you how many, I think I tried to apologize to him like 3 different times. And like actually one of the things he said to me, which, kind of struck me as like, okay, because he finally was like, you don't need to apologize to me. He's like, if you need to apologize to anyone, maybe just apologize to yourself for like, for your own reaction or whatever. He's like, but I'm not upset. You've got nothing to say sorry to me for, which I so appreciate how he's helped me kind of have that better relationship with myself. But it's like I still feel like when I do have those moments, even when it's justified, like even when or like yeah, there's just different situations where I probably should get angry and I probably should say something and I don't. So it's either I do, kind of freak out and then I backtrack and I'm like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with me?" and I do like the self-talk shame thing, or when I should say something and speak up, I don't. So that's and it's like, and I'm aware of that enough now to where I'm getting better at it. I'm getting, even when I speak up and I know I have a right to, there's still that part of me going, God, kind of like AC said, God, you're being over the top, you're being a bitch, you're being weird, you're being extra, overprotective or whatever. And, you know, so like for me, I'm learning like with my own daughter, like I'm learning how to be her voice because no one really was my voice when I was younger, But that's hard. Even when like I know like I definitely need to say something about this. The moment someone tries to reason with me, there's that part of me in the back of my mind going, "Oh, maybe they have a point. Maybe I need to sit down. Maybe I need to just calm down." And then there's that other part of me, that rage, the healthier rage that's wanting to get my attention and has a reason to speak up. That's the one that's like, "No, say something, say something, say something." And
Right.
so it's like this constant war within me on how to react appropriately, but not too much, but actually say something when I have to. So yeah, that's what I mean when I say that unhealthy part.
Yeah, fair enough. I had a,
I like how both of you now have touched on something that I was hoping was going to come up, which was talking about how becoming a parent has sort of changed the way your rage both focused and manifested. Because I mean, that's something, like, speaking from my own experience, in some ways, I really learned to rein it in when I became a dad,
Mhm.
but in other ways, I learned to do not that. Because I mean, like, in the day today, when everything's going kind of okay, when you're dealing with like normal, everyday kind of frustrations, when it was just me, that was the kind of thing where I think I was much more likely to have that switch flip and for me to go from 0 to 100. Having kids, that switch didn't get flipped very often, but when it did flip, now that I had someone to defend, someone to care about, someone who I would literally sacrifice myself, my own well-being for, there were no limitations. Fear was no longer a factor. There were no obstacles to that anger manifesting itself in the hugest, most protective, and I think arguably like the purest and most noble way possible. Whereas before, I feel like it was always kind of tainted by something. Okay, did I have a little bit too much to drink? Did I need a little bit more therapy? Should I have slept more last night? And now it's like, no, you threatened the well-being of my child, and now you're going to pay.
Mhm.
That's interesting because an aspect that I've found with my rage and my child. So learning to speak up outwardly, that's still a thing, but like my kid knows how to push my buttons.
It's their full-time job to find those buttons.
No, totally. Like, and it's funny because I started realizing, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, that when I did react in a way that I was like, oh my God, I don't like how that made me feel, it was with her. And it was through discipline. And it actually through that, I learned that I think it's a combination of growing up with my dad and then not wanting to repeat that and wanting to be a better role model for my daughter. Like it really kind of was a big part of my own healing, to be completely honest, because I was catching myself reacting negatively and well, losing, like going from 0 to 100 with her and catching myself like, wait a second, was that deserved? Like, should I have talked to her that way? Yeah, okay, she shouldn't have done XYZ, but why did I have to go to this route instead of, and so it's interesting because for me, becoming a parent has actually helped me, at least like in the interpersonal relationships, not like the rest of the world, but the interpersonal relationships, it has really helped me catch myself, redirect, and then also it taught me repair. To be completely honest, I don't think I knew how to repair in relationships when there was a rupture, when we would stop talking or there'd be a big fight, and then I would be afraid to look at them or talk to them because I hate confrontation. So I would avoid them. You know what I mean? Like that's how I would handle big blowouts with relationships. And I think with my daughter, I've actually kind of learned, how to first, be accountable, talk to her about, okay, hey, mommy shouldn't have reacted this way. And, this what you did wasn't okay either. We'll talk about that. But how I reacted wasn't okay. And, go back to that repair. So I think that in that sense, parenting has helped me learn how to, at least in interpersonal relationships, how to repair and have a different role model than what I was role modeled, I guess.
That's a
Um,
whole extra layer to like responding to the rages when you turn it into a teaching a moment with the kids, because there's so much more going on there than just trying to be a good example. It's like you realize, okay, when I was a bad example, there's still time to shift this around. Sorry,
mhm.
Jason, I cut you off.
No worries. No worries. I just wanted to say kudos to you, Sarah, because in that you did a couple things, and I think the biggest thing that I saw was that you taught your child ownership.
Mm.
Like, yes, you apologized and you did the adult thing, but before you gave her heck, you said, okay, you did something wrong also, but I have to own my crap. And here's what I did. And when a child sees their parent do that, that is probably the most progressive learning tool you can teach your child.
Thank you. Yeah, and what's nice is she's pretty self-aware for being a 9-year-old. I mean, she'll tell me how she's feeling and she'll tell me what's going on inside of her. And, you know, she'll also be the first to say, "Don't yell at me, mom." Like, you're right. No one should yell at you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's other ways to tell you that what you're doing, your behavior needs to be changed.
Mhm.
Like screaming and yelling is not the way. And so, so what I love about that is it's very funny because she's opposite of me. She will tell you how she feels and she will not be unapologetic about it. But she doesn't do it ever in like a mean way, but she's very vocal and she'll tell you what's going on inside of her and she'll tell you what she will and won't accept. And and I really love that, that it's a combination of being really self-aware of her emotions and then also of other people's emotions but then also not taking crap from other people. It's something that I'm still struggling with as an adult, and as a 9-year-old she's way better at it than I am.
Fair enough. One thing I was very surprised that I learned from rage. So, yes, we're talking is it positive or negative, but I want to touch base on a little bit about learning from rage. So I've 90% of my life I've been a very angry person, a very violent person. It didn't take much for me to want to go fisticuffs, not at all. But when my children were born, instinctively, they're the only people I never had a violent relationship with. I never had an angry relationship with them. And instinctively, any anger I had towards my children was, oh, no, let me rephrase that. Most of the anger I had towards my children was an acting anger. I found it really hard to legitimately get mad at my children because they were just amazing kids. And yeah, I know that's a biased opinion, but to me, they were awesome. And
I'll
90% of the
second
time,
that. They were awesome.
90% of the time, when I was angry at them and giving them heck what for, it was an act because, and AC's been there. You should have done that. You go to your room, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as they're out of earshot, it's him and I laughing about, oh my God, they did this. That was so funny. Oh. When I got angry with them, which was far and few between, but when I genuinely got angry, I stopped the situation. I sent them on their way and I dealt with my crap. They never got me actually angry because that was not their life. That was not their past. And they had no need to see that because that's a whole different level of anger. The anger I wanted them to see was the teaching anger, that this is a lesson you got to learn anger. And it happened instinctively. And I didn't realize it until many years later when AC and I were talking about it. And he said to me, I came to realization of it because of AC. He said, how the heck do you do that? And I said, what did I do? He said, I genuinely thought you were mad at them. But as soon as they left, like we started laughing about it. And that's when I do that. Oh crap, it's actually different. So that's another way that I guess anger can be positive.
Well, I mean, I like how you kind of approach this from like this, like what is it teaching or what can we learn from it angle? Because I learned a lot of really negative stuff about rage from my dad. Because I mean, while my dad loved me, he was also a trauma case. He
Mhm.
had undiagnosed mental challenges. He had a rough past, which is why he was the way he was. But I mean, as a kid, I didn't care about those things. I cared that my dad was being an asshole.
Right.
And it was hard because he was abusive and I just wanted him to love me. And when I became a dad, it's not like overnight I became this wonderful person who turns water into wine and walks on water and treats children wonderfully. My kids, they would, I mean, like you said, Sarah, like they find your buttons. And oh my God, are they good at it? And when I started hearing myself sounding like my father, I had like I remember the exact moment when things shifted for me. I was right in the middle of like ragefully expressing myself in the unhealthiest possible words to my younger son, and I burst into tears and I looked at my at the time wife and I said, I can't have a hand in his discipline anymore. You have to take over because I am just too fucked up to do this. And through a lot of conversations with Jason, through a lot of reflection, from a lot of therapy, from a lot of like just listening to what my kids were trying to teach me, I eventually learned that, like there is a time for the theatrical end of the rage. It's just like you can't like parent from an uncontrolled state. There has to be not like that cool, focused anger, but I mean, like, just cool and focused. Yes. The appearance of anger, well, sometimes,
Mhm.
but
Well, I would say too. Oh, sorry.
no, don't go. I'm almost done, but it's just like, yeah, just a case of like realizing that through observing where my father was coming from rather than what he did, I was able to like realize that he didn't teach me all garbage. He taught me some good stuff too, because I realized to some degree I am him. I
Mhm.
did what he didn't do. I did the work, and my kids saw the benefit. Sorry, you can go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, and I love what you just finished with too. That's really inner child work is what that is, and being able to realize, because so for me and my daughter, um, I really had to. It's funny, I had a little me in me that was upset when I'd go easy on her because I didn't have anyone going easy on me. And it was like,
Yeah.
so I noticed that in the moments that I would go over the top, it was like my inner child was having a tantrum. Like, why are you letting her get away with XYZ when we both know we couldn't do that? You know what I mean? Then, and so, but then I had a really powerful realization, which actually kind of piggybacks off of what you just shared about how it helped you actually understand your dad as a parent. I started realizing, so um, my dad was diagnosed with ADHD. And I think I'm pretty positive he had ODD too. But back then they didn't, it was a one size fits all. Here's some Ritalin, and there really was no therapy to it. And so I think that like he wasn't understood. And then whoever knows how he was parented, when he would go off on us, I'm sure it was his own inner child reacting to what he went through as a child.
Mhm.
And when I started being self aware enough for me, when I was basically seeing my own inner child having a tantrum and realizing that I'm reacting because of not even because of what my daughter's doing, because of what's being triggered in me in the moment, it helped me kind of go, whoa, what was my dad feeling in those moments when he was going off and having these rageful moments? And when I was a child, it was really scary. But as I've gotten older, because unfortunately he'll still have those outbursts, I just don't have contact with him. But now I see it more as like a giant tantrum. And I'm realizing what age are you? Where are you refracting from? What is happening inside you in your inner child that's bringing this out in you now? And so that it was this really powerful awareness for me as a parent, that it helped also give me grace when I would find myself overreacting. It was like, okay, where is this coming from in me, and why am I feeling the need to come down so hard on her? Where is, like, what happened to me that made me feel that way, which also made me see my dad differently. So yeah, this is a whole other chapter of rage, parenting, but it's a real thing.
Maybe we should have you back at some point to do like chapter two, like just focusing entirely on the parenting angle. Because I
Mhm.
feel like there's a lot of ground to cover there that, like, for time constraints, we're never going to get to today.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So look forward to a part two, guys.
Yeah,
The pressure's on you
absolutely.
now, Sarah.
No, I have a lot to say about this. Believe me, there's a lot there. I mean, it's good now, but when my daughter was younger, because she was also diagnosed with ADHD and ODD, and we went through a journey, to say the least.
Mhm.
Okay, so speaking of the time constraints, we're bumping up against the outer edges of our time here together. Is there anything before we start our final descent towards saying goodbye that either of you wanted to say? Make sure we slip in before we close the door on this.
I'll wait and I'll do my final thought at the end.
Okay.
I would say that self-awareness is everything when it comes to the relationship with your relationship with rage, and everyone has their own relationship with it. But I think the more self-aware you are, you can have a better idea of how to use it, how to utilize it, and understand it's not always a bad thing. And I think often it's not, it's just how we react or respond with it. So I would say maybe if you don't even know what your relationship with rage is, get curious.
Fair enough.
Well, it's been really interesting chatting with you on this level today, Sarah, because I mean, the previous few times we've connected, I mean, tarot has really been at the center of the conversation, and hearing that, there is an awareness and intelligence and insight within you that's not related to something beyond yourself is it just really been a treat to experience. And I hope that anybody that's listening can get even a broader taste of who you are, and maybe that will help aid them in their decision to come and seek your services, which, hey, I've said this before, I'm a pure skeptic. I don't want to believe in this stuff, but my couple of sit downs with Sarah, she offered insights that were just too accurate to ignore. I'd say check her out, whether you believe in tarot or not. Connect. And if somebody does want to connect on that line, what would be the best way for them to go about that?
Well, first of all, thank you. That really means a lot. And I've really always enjoyed interacting with you, and I'm just excited that you let me on and you be part of your conversation, because like I said, I cannot tell you how many times I've like talked to myself in my car, because I usually listen to you while I'm working and driving, because I do Amazon deliveries for my day job. But yeah, I can't tell you how many times I'm responding to you out loud, and it's nice to actually be able to respond to you in real life. So that's really cool. But yeah, I mean, if anyone wants a reading and to connect with me, you can find me at spiritjourneycollective.com. And then you can also, I have a podcast also called Spirit Journey Collective. And if you just want to like kind of get to know me through that outlet, and I'm also on Instagram under spirit_journey_collective.
Very cool. And I'm going to be a little bit presumptuous here before I do my final thought. Look for an episode with me on it later on.
Awesome.
Nicely played, sir.
Okay, so I wrote out a little bit of a final thought while we were talking. Rage, like fire, can burn or forge. If recognized and channeled constructively, with accountability and care, it can strengthen a platonic bond. But left unchecked, it will likely destroy what could have been a meaningful connection. So be careful. And when I say that, I don't mean be cautious. I mean be careful with people that you interact with. Love them, listen to them, and act appropriately. Love everybody.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I don't have much in the way of final thoughts. I mean, obviously, what we learned today is that this conversation surrounding rage involves many perspectives, many experiences. I think that it is a complex topic that deserves our consideration, whether we're talking with others or just reflecting within ourselves. It isn't necessarily this big, ugly, explosive, violent, damaging thing. There is good that can come from it and through it, or even because of it or in spite of it. So take a little bit of time this week, my friends. Think about like the role that rage has played in your life. Of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Don't forget to check out Spirit Journey Collective. Awesome, awesome stuff. And I'm not just saying that because I've been a guest, but mostly. And as always, my friends, now and moving forward until we meet again. One love.